We just got done with Roots, right? A whole series on Genesis, but I'm going to continue it today. Just one more time, because we love Genesis, right, Jay? Genesis 22. So now this is the part of the Bible where Abraham has gone through all these crazy things in his life, and then he finally has his son, the promise, right? And then God comes to him and says, I got last test for you. You know, Abraham has been going through these little quizzes, but then he's got this almost final exam that he's going to get put through. And throughout this message, theologically, I had a lot of questions. Even learning the Bible, I had a lot of questions about what we're about to go through. But we're going to start off with, again, Genesis 22, verse 1. And that's when God pretty much calls him up and said, hey, get up, you got to go. I got something for you. So, verse 1. Abraham tested. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, said Abraham. Then God said, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain that I will show you. I had a lot of issues with that. First of all, the first awesome thing about that part is that's the first time in the Bible where the word love shows itself. If you go from that point back, you won't see it. In the ancient Hebrew and in the Greek, you don't see it. This is the first time the word love is mentioned, and he tells him, your son whom you love. Throughout today's message, you're going to be, hopefully, you're going to see the foreshadowing of what is to come 2,000 years from that time. But part of the problem that I had is that now that I have children, I was like, God, how can you ask this of us, of your people? Like you're asking me to pretty much grab my kid and offer him up as a burnt offering, not knowing what Abraham already knows at that time. And I had a really big issue with that. So, you know, here's God saying, here's the promise that I'm giving you. Here's Isaac. That's the promise. Through him, a lot of things are going to happen. But now, God, you're asking me to sacrifice my son. I don't get it. But see, that's just Oscar's way of thinking. Abraham wasn't thinking that. See, Abraham had already had all these little quizzes. Abraham knew something. Abraham didn't make any excuses. Abraham didn't ask anything. Why do I have to do this? No, Abraham got up the next morning and went to the place. Didn't question anything. I'm not saying that in his mind he's going like, what is going on? He was obedient. He was very obedient to what he would say. See, Oscar wouldn't have done that. And notice here how God gives us these plans, but he gives us these plans in small details. He doesn't give us the whole thing, because if Oscar got the whole, plan, this is what I want you to do, then I would have been like, nah, I don't want that. I'm not going to do that. That's probably about 60% of the time how I answer. 95 or more percent of the time I would have said, oh, that's the plan? Good. I don't need you no more, God. I'm going to go on and carry on with the plan today. And that's what we do. So he gives us these little pieces so that we're obedient in them, slowly, slowly. And I think as we move slowly in this obedience, it gets the details come in more detail, right? Because now we're not questioning things. The small things that God asks us to do, we always tend to try to figure out, how am I going to do it? After we're obedient, how am I going to do this, God? Or how are you going to intervene? How is this going to happen? So we move forward onto verse 3 and 4. Going on because I'm going to tell you guys a story as we're reading the Bible. Early the next morning, Abraham got up, loaded his donkey, and he took with him 2 servants and his son Isaac. When he cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God told him about. I want you to pay attention to this part, okay, and just remember it. Verse 4 says, on the third day, Abraham looked up and he saw the place in the distance. And he said to his servants, stay here with the donkey, for I and the boy will go over there, worship, and we are coming back. See, that's another problem I had. God just told you to sacrifice your son. What's this we we're talking about? What, you got a mouse in your pocket, Abraham? You speak French, oui? How is it that you're... Sorry. But I had a problem with that. If God just told you to sacrifice your son, but you're telling them, we are going and we are coming back. Abraham knew something. And I've always been troubled by, what did he know? What is he not telling me? Why is it not in the Bible? Because I want to know. Now I want to know. That creates us to dig into things a little bit more. See, that's the beautiful thing about the Word of God, is that within these words, there are other words that are hidden in there that are called the revelation. God starts to reveal things to you. So in my questioning of we are coming back, I started looking more deeply into this, and I'm starting to realize that God himself and Abraham were having this experience, that we're walking through all these circumstances. Abraham had already, he was old, but he had already been working with God. God had been promising him. He went from a land where he was from, and God's like, hey, I want you to go 1,000 miles in that direction. That was faith moving him, right? Never questioned it. He got in trouble in Egypt with his wife, and I don't know, he called his wife his sister. I'm pretty sure there was relation between, there were maybe distant cousins, but he was already in trouble. He went through Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, Abraham had already seen God's miracles. He had already even hosted angels. There was these 3 angels that went to him. And again, a lot of scholars think that one of these angels was the angel of the Lord, that it was Jesus himself that he was experiencing already. So Abraham had already experienced God in many different ways before this happened. There was something that he knew. So I keep digging. What did Abraham know? Looking at all these circumstances, Abraham knew that he served the God of resurrection. Because Sarah was already 90 years old when her womb was resurrected, and they had Isaac. Abraham was way above 100. He was resurrected. God just doesn't resurrect, the whole human race or the dead. He resurrects body parts too. We could see it in Jesus. When Jesus was going around, he was healing the blind. They had eyes that were dead, and he resurrected them. He gave them sight. He was giving, the deaf were hearing. Ears were being resurrected. There was people that were paralyzed. He gave life to their legs. We serve a God of resurrection, and Abraham knew this. So I remember one thing that Jay said about Hebrews. So whenever you're doing your study in the Old Testament, you want to go forward in Hebrews and look and see what there is, and I found it. Hebrews 11, verses 17 to 19. I found it there because there in Hebrews 11, it's going through the faith walk that all these, they call the ancients, the patriarchs have, and it zooms in on Abraham, and it gives him a big, he's the father of 3 faiths, but 17 to 19 reads, by faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice, whom he had embraced the prom. He who embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had told him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And in that manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. See, he knew that they were going to the mountain and we are coming back. There's the evidence right there in Hebrews. Abraham knew, and he saw something. He knew it because he had been walking with the Lord. He had this experience with him, this relationship, that when God told him to do something, he was obedient. He was obedient. Not only did he show it that is faith, guys, is when you step it forward into this and there's actions behind your obedience. And I believe that this story happened to show us exactly what the example of walking forward in obedience with God and not questioning, because I'll question all day long, But trust me, I never get it right. It's not until I say, you know what? I'm going to step back and let you drive. And he always takes me to the right place. That's just how he works. When Abraham saw the promise and the command contradict each other, because I saw it. If I saw it, I know he saw it. He sees the promise. He sees the command. And he's like, yo, this doesn't make any sense. Here's the promise you gave me, and you're asking me to sacrifice him. He saw that they contradicted each other, but he did what we should all do. He obeyed the command, and he let God take care of the promise. That's all he had to do, and it sounds simple, but it's very hard to do. You have to listen to the command, knowing that God is going to take care of the promise. And the promise is that they're there. They're there. We saw it 2,000 years ago. God not only resurrects the dead, okay, he always makes sure, look, I'll be witness here. He resurrects the dead spiritually. All right? Because I was just a dead spiritual man walking around, and he gave me life. He gave me a good life. And now I'm up here, not because I'm anybody special, but because I'm broken, speaking to broken people, letting you know that you can be resurrected, that your spirit can be resurrected. Moving on to Genesis 22, verse 8 to 6. Go on with the story because there's more. All right? There's more. Trying to find my place here. Abraham took the wood. So they go to the place. He tells his servants, hey, we're coming back. You know, servants are like, okay, we know what you're going to do up there. Sure, you'll come back. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offerings, and he placed it on his son Isaac. So I imagine that he puts it on his back, right? Because I think that's something my dad would do, like, here, carry this. I'm pretty sure, and you can ask him. He's right over there. He places it on Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. The two went up together. Isaac asked his dad at this point. He's like, Dad, I see you got the fire. I see you got the knife. Where's the lamb? You know, as he's walking with the wood, right? And, you know, Abraham answers back, and he says, the fire, or God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. See, he already knew that. Abraham did not know exactly what was going to happen, but he knew that they were going to go up there. He knew he was probably going to maybe have to, you know, come down with some force, but he knew that we're both coming back. Now, scholars believe that Isaac at the time could have been anywhere between 17 years old and 38. Because as we read forward onto this, we start reading that Isaac himself was bound. And if Abraham was more than 100 years old, I know that his 17-year-old son could probably take him. All right? I'm pretty sure. Yet, the Bible says that he was bound. So there's somebody else's faith there that was also tested. And it's not really, you have to look to it, right? He didn't fight. He didn't fight. This all starts, the foreshadowing kind of is very heavy, right, Jay? His son did not fight. And yet he allowed him to be bound. Scripture goes on and tells us that Abraham at this point reaches for the knife and is coming down with the strike. And again, the angel of the Lord speaks out to him and says, Abraham, Abraham. This time he called him out twice. You know, when he calls you out once, you listen. When he says, Abraham, Abraham, when he calls your name twice, you better drop everything. Drop the mic. I'm done. Abraham stops, and at this point, man, I got a really, really big problem theologically with this next verse, because God calls out and he says in verse 12, do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. There's many problems there that I also had. And this is just me questioning the Bible, right? Like anybody else, we question it, but there's answers behind that. For one, God is omniscient. At least I was taught that way, the way the stories in the Bible. God knows everything. God sees everything. He knew everything before he created the earth. He knew what was happening in the end. He's everywhere, right? I mean, we all can agree that. And I would sit there and think, how is it that you're now saying, now I know? I was thinking it in human perspective, I guess, an Oscar perspective, right? What God meant there now is that he knew this was going to happen, but he now experienced the love that Abraham had for God through his faith. It was the experience. That's why it's so important when Jesus tells us to have a relationship with us. It's because he wants the experience. God wants to experience our love through us stepping into faith and obedience. That's what it's all about. And at that point, God, knowing that this was going to happen, was in the time when Abraham actually committed the act and experienced his obedience and his love. And that's what God was talking about when he says, now I know. So intellectually, he knew. It was the experience of living through the moment of experiencing the love that Abraham had for him. I can sit here and say that I love God all day. I can, and any of us can. But it's not till we actually blindly step into the faith, into doing his will. And having this faith requires an act. Because we go to James 2, and it says, faith without the works is dead. So you can sit here and believe all day, but you're doing nothing if you're not acting on it. So you have to put these two together, because Abraham could have sat there and be like, yeah, I believe you're going to bring them back. But then he didn't have to do anything or go up the mountain or try to even commit the act, because that's not showing faith. There has to be an act behind that, works. That's what that means. So faith without the works is dead. You can't just sit there and say, oh, well, I'm a Christian, and then sit at home and do nothing. There has to be some kind of an act. You have to show that faith. Slowly starts. It's not overnight. But eventually it gets there. You start acting forward. You start being more obedient. It's like you start trusting. I know I have trusting issues. And at first, when I first said, yes, Lord, man, it took a long time for me to actually say, okay, I'm going to trust that you know better than me. Because I have a thick head. I mean, there's a brain probably about that big in the middle. It's about that thick. Caleb's looking like, what? Really? You know, he feels our love through the choice that he feels our love because we choose him over the things that we love most in life. So this brings up a question. What is your Isaac? You know, who is your Isaac? Whether it's a person, a thing, a circumstance, a situation, who is your Isaac? What is the thing that God can't have because you are just too attached to it? What is it? It could be anything. It could be a job. It could be another person. Who is your Isaac? Because sometimes we hold on to our Isaac so tight, and we're holding him by the hand so tight that we don't allow God's blessings. We don't continue, or we start this. It's like we start a test and we don't finish it because we're holding on to Isaac so tightly and we're not giving them up to God, knowing that he will take care of the promise if we just step forward in the command that he gives us. On that mountain, when God comes through, when the angel of the Lord comes and says, hey, listen, you just stop. Now I know. Now I know that you fear me. Abraham happened to look up, and he sees that in the thicket, just appeared out of nowhere, there's this ram, right? How magical. Here's what we don't know. See, God already has these things planned, because as Abraham is coming up the side of the mountain with his son, on this other side where we can't see nothing happening is another ram. also coming up the same mountain. We don't see his provisions. We don't have to see his provisions. We know he's going to provide it, whether he appeared it magically because he can do it, or whether this stupid ram was just like, I'm told to go this way. Because that's why I see it happening. And again, this ram, when he got caught in the thickets, just says he got caught in the thickets. It's not saying he's doing this and screaming and yelling, because apparently Abraham and Isaac didn't see him or didn't hear him. Abraham just looked up and there he is. A quiet, silent sacrifice. Again, the foreshadowing is heavy. Heavy, because that ram was just there quietly, waiting to get sacrificed. I'm getting hungry now. I love it. Love it. So Abraham calls that place Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. You know, I looked up the word provide in Hebrew, and it's a word that is translated as provision. Provision means to pro-see. God pro-saw everything that he was going to provide. That's why the word is to perceive. Because God will provide. He sees things that we don't see. We live in this box, guys. And that box can only allow us to see till maybe, a few hours from now. I know I'm going to go eat something. God sees way beyond that. He's a timeline. He's outside of that timeline. He provides. We don't ask and we don't think about how he's going to provide. We just lean forward and we know that he's going to provide. And I'll tell you what, I have seen that happen even in this church. Within the last couple of months, we have seen this happen. We're still here. There's churches. There's big churches in Austin that they're not surviving. And yet here's 512 City Church. We're still here. We're a global church, by the way. You know why? Because our pastor right now is in South Africa, so that makes us global. That makes us really global. Verse 15, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time. That was Jesus. And said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand and on the shore. Your descendants will take possession of cities from their enemies. And through your offspring, through your offspring, all nations will be blessed on earth. Who's he talking about there? See, Abraham knew that he had this blessing of a son in Isaac, and through Isaac there was going to be this lineage, this offspring where humanity was going to be saved. So did Abraham's son get sacrificed? Not his son really, but in the lineage, if you go in 2,000 years forward into time, there was a son of Abraham, son of Isaac, son of Jacob, son of David, going on, who got sacrificed for humanity, for all of us. And as we sit there and we're holding Isaac so hard, and we're just holding on to our Isaacs, and Isaac again could be a circumstance, a situation, and we're sitting there holding him by his hand, and we try to figure out how then. I know, God, that you're going to do this. I know that you got this. I just got to give it up to you, but how are you going to do it? Again, we're just thick-headed people thinking, what's the plan? I want to know the plan so that I can move forward. Jesus, if you go and we look to John 8, verse 56, Jesus was having a discussion at this time with the Pharisees.
Genesis 22.
With the Pharisees, I know. Technology. And it's this part where he's sitting there and he's debating with the Pharisees, right? Because he's always fighting with them. And this is the point, the part in John when they're sitting there questioning, he's telling them who he is, that he's the Son of God, and they're sitting there going, yeah, whatever, dude, you're not even 50. and God's like, well, yeah, but before, Abraham was, I was. And they're like, oh my God. And they want to stone him and kill him. But he also tells them on verse 56, and because I already messed it up here, he says to them, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. I always wondered, where is that? If he's saying he saw it and he's telling me up here, he saw it back then, I had to go back in here. I go back to the Old Testament, starting to look it up. Well, remember when I told you to remember verse 4? And you said that Abraham looked up on the third day and he saw that that was the place. I think that Abraham saw something. Abraham saw something that confirmed what he already knew. See, because Mount Moriah is but a few hundred yards from Mount Calvary. There was something that he saw. He saw the sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of his son Isaac. He saw the sacrifice of his descendant Jesus. The ultimate sacrifice. That's what he saw. And Jesus in John 8 tells us what Abraham saw back in Genesis 22:4. And earlier, Melissa, when you were talking about keeping your eyes fixed on Jesus, that's what Abraham was doing, because that's what he was dealing with the whole time when he was going through Gomorrah, angels, and all these. He was talking to Jesus. So he focused on Jesus. 2,000 years back, before it even happened, he's sitting there focused on Jesus and Jesus only. Doesn't care where he's being told to go. Doesn't care who he's being told to sacrifice. Jesus. That's all he's focused on. And we should learn from that, because when we think we're failures, we need to focus on Jesus. When we think we're being tempted, we focus on Jesus. When we are having troubles with our addictions, we focus on Jesus. When we're having troubles in our marriage, at work, in our own lives, you focus on Jesus. You have to look up and just focus on Jesus. Because if Abraham did it 2,000 years before his time, then how about us, that we know that he came, died, and was raised on the third day? And we know it happened, yet we struggle. And here's a man 4,000 years ago, saw it all because he put his trust in God. I like that day 3 thing. And I'll close with this. And again, it's the who is your Isaac? What's keeping you from moving forward? And I see every week we see each other. The question like this that I'm posting is more for you online. That you're sitting here within the city and you're not letting go of something. What's keeping you from communing with a church? You don't have to come to this church, but go find a church. Don't sit home and stream and say, this is good enough. No, you have to let go. There's something we have to let go of. And I think everybody has an Isaac. Everybody has an Isaac. And we need to really reflect on that and figure out what our Isaacs are that we need to just let go. Because if it's something you love so dearly, trust me, just like I said earlier, God will take care of the promise. All you got to do is step forward in the command. Sounds easy. But you really have to sit there and think about it, because I guess it's not easy, but it's not easy. Today I was feeling that I was feeling a little bit nervous, and my wife tells me that I'm really good at hiding it, because when I get nervous, I talk. So this is perfect, right? People don't see it. But honestly, today, I don't know who this message was for. Just like any time that I get to speak, once I get up and I start talking, that feeling goes away. That feeling goes away because I do trust that God will put and take control of whatever it is that I have to say, and that it's him speaking, not me. Because no matter who we are, Abraham didn't get this right the first time. See, Abraham messed up a lot in his life, and we can read that. And not just Abraham, but all these ancients that the Hebrew talks about, these patriarchal fathers, they all messed up. They all got it wrong. But there was a retest, and there was a retest, and there was another test. And the beautiful thing is that God will sit there and retest us until we pass and we get it right. And then you move forward with your blessing. So there's no person up here on stage that's perfect. There's no one up here that hasn't messed up. We continue to live life every day because we need Jesus every day. So if you're sitting in a situation where you think you're just a failure and you just keep failing and failing and failing and failing, it's okay. You're going to get it right because God's sitting there with you and he's waiting for you to pass the test.